What strange thing did you find out about someone else that they thought was perfectly normal? Story 1. I used to work at a coffee shop and noticed this attractive girl who came in a few times a week. She was friendly, professional, well put together. Nothing weird. One night, I went out to a bar and saw her there. We chatted, flirted a bit, and eventually ended up at her place. After a few more drinks and some playful teasing, she got all over me. Cool. We're in her room when she suddenly says, "Wait, I want to show you something." I raise an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's that?" She reaches under her bed and pulls out a book. Sitting next to me on the bed, she opens it. "This is the first guy I ever been with," she says. "His name is Steve. We met in high school and blah blah blah." I nod slowly, thinking, okay, weird. Then she flips to the next page. She flips the page and says, "This is the second guy. His name is Mark. We met when I was working at such and such." And it just keeps going. One by one, she goes through about 30 guys she's been with, each documented in this bizarre scrapbook. I am talking full-page spreads with ticket stubs, photos, receipts, like a literal scrapbook of dong. Now, I am not trying to shame her. 30 isn't a shocking number, but the scrapbook. And why are you showing this to me right now, as we're about to have a romantic night? It was a huge turnoff. I said, "I am tired, and I've got work in the morning," giving myself an out. She wanted me to stay, and well, do it. Nope, I got dressed and left. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. My friend's sister had used the toilet and it wasn't flushing. She casually walked into the kitchen while my buddy and I were watching Friday night videos and grabbed a pocket knife from the junk drawer. As she headed back to the bathroom, my buddy asked, "Hey, what do you need a knife for?" She just said the toilet wouldn't flush. Their dad heard this, ran to the bathroom and yelled, "Who did this?" Which brought their mom running in, and she freaked out. Soon, all 5 of us were in the bathroom, standing in awe of her magnificent log. The dad asked, "What's the knife for?" And the sister replied, "It's what I use to cut them." Yeah, that's exactly what she said. There was a pause until their mom asked, "How long have you been cutting with that knife?" My friend was in tears from laughing. "Well, since we're all here, I guess the secret's out," she said. "I get massive ones on my period, Mom, so for about 6 years. As she tried to leave, her dad grabbed her and said, "Cut the cheese, sweet pea, and that's your knife now." I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard. She was in tears. Her mom was mortified. Her dad was trying to be supportive, and my buddy and I were being total jerks. Her dad pulled us aside and threatened to kick the crap out of us if a word about Sir Turdley of Bummertown got out of the house. We never mentioned it outside their house, but at home, we were absolutely brutal to her about it. Story 3. I once had a roommate who never closed anything or cleaned up after himself. He actually managed to leave our apartment door open for 36 hours once because of how our work schedules lined up. It started with cabinet doors and drawers. Almost immediately after he moved in, I began finding them left open all the time. One day, he couldn't find what he needed, and every single cabinet door and drawer, top and bottom, was left wide open. Milk was routinely left uncapped, sitting on the table next to his dirty cereal dishes. When I asked him about it, he'd give me a weird look and grudgingly comply, like he was sulking over being scolded. Then, one day, his mother came to visit, and a giant light bulb went off in my head. I watched in absolute astonishment as she dutifully followed him around, cleaning up after him as he went about his routine. He'd grab a bowl and spoon. She would close the drawer and cabinet door as soon as he moved away. He'd take the milk. She would close the refrigerator door. As he ate, she sat beside him, silently watching. When he finished, he simply stood up and walked away, and she meticulously cleaned everything up. I stood there, dumbfounded for a few minutes. So, when she left, I told him that his mother wasn't there anymore and that he needed to learn to clean up after himself. His response, "I am getting married soon. I don't need to." His fiancée was just as obsessively doting and quite attractive. Since he was a plain-looking, dull individual, I initially assumed he must have been exceptionally well endowed. but in the end, it turned out to be a strange, almost cult-like adherence to a warped form of Christianity. Story 4. I was talking to my husband on the phone when he told me to hang on. He had to put his clothes back on. He was at work. I asked what the hell he was doing, and apparently, he always takes all his clothes off to take a dump, even at work. I knew he did it at home, but he usually showered afterward, so I thought it was just part of that routine. He said he balances his clothes over the stall door so they don't get poop particles on them. I told him no one else does this. He hadn't noticed because in the men's room he's been using for the last 10 years, there's only one stall. I still don't know why no colleague ever asked him why he hangs his clothes over the stall door. Story 5. Back in college, I had a friend over who brought along a guy he had just met. We had a chill evening, lots of beer, Mexican food, and Wii Sports. The guy was handsome, witty, funny, just seemed like a normal, average dude. At some point, he went to use the bathroom and came out after a while, asking where I kept the gloves. "Gloves?" I asked, thinking this was the start of a joke. "Yeah, you know the gloves for number 2? I laughed it off, thinking he was messing with me. "Bro, for real, I am not keen on getting crap on my fingers." That's when my friend and I shared a look and realized something was definitely off here. Turns out, this guy had been struggling with severe constipation his entire adult life. Whenever he went to the bathroom, he'd wear disposable plastic gloves and, well, start mining for coal, so to speak. Apparently, that's the method he learned from his parents. We gently suggested that the state of his bowel movements might be a medical issue and that he should see a doctor as soon as possible. I never saw him again after that. My friend later told me the guy felt embarrassed for being told his way of taking dump wasn't normal. I still can't believe he was around 20 and hadn't figured that out before. Story 6. One of my friends and I were talking about going home for the holidays. She mentioned that she hates going home because her dad always wants her to sleep in the same bed and her mom is completely fine with it. Being me, I asked more. She said, "Well, I mean, it was okay before, but I am 23 now. It's just dumb, you know?" That made me push further, and she admitted they even showered together. I told her straight up that was SA, but she just laughed it off. I grabbed her shoulders and said, "Girl, that's SA, you should talk to someone." Her parents have been divorced for quite some time. I haven't seen her in a while, so I don't know what came of it, but the whole thing still makes me shiver. Story 7. This happened a few months after I started dating my boyfriend who's 24. He almost never gets sick, but one day he had a runny nose. The entire time he kept sniffing his snot back up into his nose, until I finally said, "You should probably just blow your nose." He looked at me like I was insane. "Why? That's unnecessary. I've always just sucked it back up my nose." I raised an eyebrow. "You've always done that?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "It's normal." When I kept insisting, he finally muttered, I don't actually know how. I've never really tried it before." I laughed, thinking he was joking, until he actually attempted it. He shoved a tissue up his nostril, blew out a little, then pulled it back and said triumphantly, "See? Useless." I got up, held the tissue to his nose, and told him to blow as hard as he could. We kept at it for about 10 minutes until he got too lightheaded to continue. He stood up, fiddled with his nose for a second, then looked at me with wide eyes and exclaimed, "Wow, is this what breathing through your nose feels like?" And that was the day I discovered that my 6'4", 250-pound athletic boyfriend had gone his entire life as a mouth breather, simply because no one had ever taught him to blow his nose. Story 8. I was roommates with a guy for several months and started noticing he was an extremely picky eater. I would always offer him food, and he consistently declined, sometimes looking at it with visible disgust. I am an adventurous eater and often try all kinds of ethnic foods and unusual dishes, so this stood out to me. Eventually, I got curious enough to ask him about his diet, and he opened up. He ate plain cheeseburgers, cheese pizza, mac and cheese, hot dogs, chicken nuggets, ice cream, basically nothing else. He was 25 at the time, but had the diet of an 8-year-old. He openly admitted that he hated all vegetables and only ate bread, meat, and cheese. He despised Mexican food, Chinese food, salads, and anything even slightly spicy. He thought I was the weird one, just trying to be different by eating all this weird stuff. Just to clarify, I completely understand this is not a healthy diet for anyone. When I said diet of an 8-year-old, I meant it's the kind of diet that a lot of American 8-year-olds would choose for themselves if their parents didn't make them eat healthier. Also, my roommate did not grow up impoverished. His parents are actually fairly wealthy. Story 9. I had a roommate who only owned white clothes. I'd watch him do his laundry, and every time his laundry basket was full of whites. It got me thinking he wore white pants and a white lab coat to work, saying it all matched that way. I found it kind of weird. One day, when he wasn't home, I decided to peek in his dresser. Every single drawer, 5 in total, was filled exclusively with white clothes. It wasn't just clothing either. He didn't want us to hang anything on the walls after we painted them white, of course. None of my framed posters or artwork could go up anywhere except in my bedroom. One day, I noticed a set of electric shears tucked under the sink, not a cheap trimmer like I had for my beard. These were professional, the kind a barber would use. Curious, I asked him why he had them. He explained it was for cutting his hair. He had extremely curly hair and trimmed it himself. I'd never heard of anyone cutting their own hair before, so naturally, I asked how often he did it. Daily, he said. Every morning, he would check for any new sprouts and trim them immediately. He also complained about how hard it was to meet girls. I told him, "You have to get out of the apartment." So I invited him to come out with me and my friends. We went out a lot, practically every weekend. He always declined, saying things like, "I have to get up early," or "I've got stuff to do." One day, we were planning to go to the Chinese theater, the place where stars put their hands and feet in cement and sign their names. A world-famous spot, really cool to see. I asked him if he wanted to come. He declined again, though he asked me what it was like. I said, "You grew up and lived your whole life in LA and you've never seen it?" He just shrugged. "Nope." I told him, "No wonder you never meet anyone." He simply wouldn't go. He always got home from work about 90 minutes before me. By the time I walked in, he had just finished cooking dinner, just for himself. The place would smell amazing, and there he'd be, sitting alone, eating. I tried discussing sharing food, splitting groceries, sharing things like milk and eggs, but he never participated. After about 8 months, he finally moved out while I was on a work trip. I didn't have anyone lined up to replace him, so I ended up paying the full rent and had the place to myself for a month. It was fine. He stopped by to grab his mail and mentioned his new place fell through. He was crashing on a friend's couch for the month. I said, "I will be gone most of the month. You can have your room back." He declined. Honestly, I don't miss him a bit. Story 10. My stepmom puts mustard in scrambled eggs. I was visiting home on leave from the army. My dad had remarried while I was away, so I had never lived with my stepmom. One of my older brothers happened to be visiting at the same time. That morning, my stepmom made a big breakfast for us and my step-siblings, and I was genuinely excited. I took one bite of the eggs and immediately stopped. They were terrible. I casually ate around them while talking to the family, unsure of what to do. After dragging my feet long enough, everyone was finishing up, so I waited for a moment when people were distracted and discreetly dumped the eggs in the trash. Afterward, I took my brother aside and said, "Dude, what the heck was up with the eggs?" He replied, "Oh, she puts mustard in them. It's not that bad." I was mortified. The next morning, I woke up hungry and was looking for food. My stepmom asked if I wanted some eggs. Naturally, I said, "No thanks, I am not hungry, just foraging," and decided to skip breakfast. About an hour later, I was starving, so I decided to make some eggs for myself. I asked my stepbrother if he wanted some, and he said sure. Note, this isn't the brother who had experienced the mustard eggs. I whipped up some delicious eggs, and it was just me and my stepbrother in the kitchen. He dug in and exclaimed, "Holy crap, what did you put in these? They are amazing." I told him, "Nothing, absolutely nothing. That's what eggs actually taste like," and he had never had a clue. Story 11. I was in a fraternity one summer when a beautiful female friend came over and mentioned that her brother would be a freshman the following year. We held rush all summer and were always looking for someone with a hot sister, so we asked if he'd be interested in coming to a party. Her response was quick. "I don't think he'd be a good fit," she said. When we pressed her, she acted oddly, fidgeting before finally explaining he only eats French fries. We were stunned. "He loves French fries and eats them all the time?" I asked. "No," she said firmly. "He only eats French fries." "For how long?" Another guy piped up. "Since he was a little kid," she replied. We asked how that was possible. "He drinks protein shakes and takes supplemental vitamins," she said. "Other than that, the only food he will eat is French fries." Naturally, this led to a lot more questions. "But he'll eat pizza, right?" one of us asked. "No," she said firmly. "He only eats French fries." "What about a hamburger with fries?" I tried. "Burger. No. Fries. Yes," she replied. "What about a baked potato?" another voice asked. "No." "Scalloped potatoes?" "French fries," she answered, clearly exasperated. "What about tater tots? He's got to eat tater tots, right?" "I told you," she snapped. "He only eats French fries." "Curly fries?" someone pressed. "No, damn it. Just ordinary fast food style French fries." "Seasoned curly fries?" She rolled her eyes, and we quickly realized she was getting annoyed. We stopped asking after all. She was hot. We never brought it up again, and he moved into the dorms. But we never stopped talking about him. The boy we unimaginatively nicknamed Fry Guy. At least once a month, the subject would come up again, usually in the form of some drunken fool's quasi-philosophical quandary. "Do you think he eats JoJo's?" someone would ask. "That's like a French fry, only bigger. I bet he'd eat a JoJo." None of us could say. Story 12. When I was a kid, I met two sisters around my age who didn't know their parents' names. I asked them what their dad's name was, and they just looked at each other confused. "His dad," they said. They seemed genuinely surprised that I knew my parents' names. They'd apparently never thought about it. Their dad called them back in for dinner, and being 9 and completely perplexed, I asked him, "Why don't your daughters know your name?" He got agitated. "They don't need to know my name. I am dad, and that's that." I tried to reason with him. What if they had to call 911 or something? He got even angrier. "They can just say mom or dad is an emergency." It was weird. This guy also punished the girls by making them eat whole onions like apples. At 9, I just shrugged it off. As an adult, it kind of worries me. Story 13. A friend of mine married her high school boyfriend, but they divorced several years later. That's when I got to know her. One day, she mentioned getting back into dating, and I jokingly told her to pack some rubbers, because dealing with both an STD and a divorce would be really awful. "Why would I need rubber? And what's a stage?" she asked. She had zero knowledge about protection and no concept of STDs. I was shocked, but not as shocked as she was when she learned that doing it without protection could give her a disease she might carry for life. She didn't believe me at first and thought I was joking. It actually turned into a pretty big argument. A few days later, when I saw her again, she was in tears, apologizing and thanking me. She had spent some time researching STDs and realized they were very real. Despite our age difference, I couldn't understand how someone who went to the school just next door had absolutely no knowledge about STDs. I thought sex ed was supposed to improve over time. Story 14. There was this guy I went to college with who, whenever the urge hit while he was in the shower, would just relieve himself there instead of getting out to use the toilet. He had done this all through his childhood, and it wasn't until college, when he had to share bathroom facilities, that he realized other people weren't okay with smelling crap as he waffle-stomped it down the drain. Story 15. I worked with a guy who had some kind of stomach problem. He would sit at his desk and puke into a cup. Not a lot, just a small verp a few times a day, even in meetings. Eventually, his boss pulled him aside and told him that wasn't acceptable and that he should see a doctor. The guy was genuinely surprised. "Why?" he asked. He had apparently been doing this his whole life. He finally went to a doctor, and sure enough, there was medicine for his condition. He had grown up in a country where it was never addressed, likely because of poverty or neglect, maybe both. But the damage was already done. Everyone knew him as the verp guy, and people avoided him. Eventually, he was let go. Edit. Hopefully this clears things up. I asked a friend from those days, and he said the guy was from Ukraine and part of a temp workforce hired through an agency for domestic help desk work until permanent staff came on. I didn't interact with him much, but the first time I saw him do the verp in a cup was in the office kitchen. At first, I assumed it was chewing tobacco and thought, wow, crude, without realizing the actual thing. I didn't even connect the smell, since the kitchen sometimes reeked like that when they cleaned out the automatic coffee machines. He looked a little touched. His eyes were just far enough apart to seem off, though not like Down syndrome. His teeth were short, uneven, and widely spaced, like chiclets. He also had Vulcan-like eyebrows. He dressed surprisingly well, bright white starched shirts and undershirts, while everyone else wore t-shirts and jeans. He had been working there about a month when people started talking about him, and that's when I learned it was verps, a term we stole from Tim Allen's stand-up days, and not chewing tobacco. He used disposable cups from the office kitchen and threw them out each day, but it was still disgusting when there were 30 people crammed into a meeting room and he'd suddenly do his little thing. And it was sad because he was a friendly guy, but he clearly had issues with personal space. He'd talk to you just an inch from your face and keep following you that way, even if you backed up. His boss eventually talked to him about it, and he stopped again, simply because he didn't know it was a problem. I really think he was slightly mentally challenged and lacked social skills, but he did try to improve whenever someone pointed something out. As for why he left, it could have been because his contract expired, because we stopped using that temp agency, or most likely because of the constant layoffs the company did. They had a, if you want to get rid of people, just tack them on the next round policy, and we averaged 2 to 3 of those layoffs every year. Story 16. It was a completely normal day. My fiancé and I were at the local grocery store, grabbing the usual staples. We always keep some frozen chicken and vegetables on hand for a quick meal in case we're tired or just don't feel like cooking. We were walking down the aisle with ice cream on one side and convenience items like Hot Pockets and pizza rolls on the other. My fiancée was talking about something when she suddenly stomped her foot, did a hard triple take, and exclaimed, "Shut the F up! You can buy corn dogs!" I laughed and said, "Is that a joke?" She had apparently thought you could only get corn dogs at the regional carnival or fair that comes around here in October. Story 17. In grade 5, our teacher was leading a discussion about words and why it's important to choose the right ones when writing. He asked us to share some of our favorite and least favorite words and explain why, as a way to expand our vocabularies. We all took turns until it was my friend Paige's turn. She shared her favorite word and explained that she liked it because it was sweet. Everyone assumed she meant it was nice or pleasant. Then she shared her least favorite word and said she hated it because it was sour. At that moment, the whole class just looked at each other, thinking, she just said sour, right? It turns out Paige has a type of synesthesia, a rare condition that causes a person to taste certain flavors when they hear or even think specific words. She had lived her whole life thinking it was completely normal, since it's such a unique and unusual experience that nobody ever mentioned it as a condition. Later that year, she had tests done, and they actually detected chemical changes in her brain and saliva when certain words were spoken. Pretty fascinating. For anyone curious about her favorite and least favorite words, I reached out to Paige to ask. At the time, her favorite word was cradle, which she found and still finds very sweet. Her least favorite word was harmonica, which is so sour she can actually feel her tongue cramp in the back of her mouth. Since then, she's discovered a love for the word chartreuse, a color which she describes as rich, chocolatey vanilla, almost like a Lindor chocolate. She also realized in high school that she was tasting wine every time she said guinea, but only when referring to the animal. Her least favorite word is still harmonica, but funnily, she also never liked her own name, comparing its taste to kale or some other dry, bitter lettuce. Story 18. This one's about me. In my early 20s, I started having a lot of pain in my upper left jaw. My dentist said there was nothing wrong with my teeth and suggested I see a sinus specialist. When I got to the ENT doctor, they commented on how stuffed up I must be. I was a little baffled and said that actually I was breathing much easier that day than usual. That's when I found out that most people can breathe through their noses most of the time, not just on special occasions. It turns out I am allergic to dust mites in a how have you not had anaphylaxis and died kind of way, and I have been experiencing an allergy attack for 23 straight years. That doctor's visit legitimately changed my life. I no longer had to choose between breathing and eating. Story 19. This isn't about a friend, but something I only realized when my wife pointed it out. I always thought it was completely normal for your eyes to unfocus naturally when you're tired. 7-year-old me remembers staying up late reading and having to cover one eye and then switch eyes just to keep going. Fast forward to being married, and my wife casually mentions that sometimes she doesn't know which of my eyes to look at while we're talking. That's when I learned that binocular diplopia is a real thing. The fix? Surgery to better align the eye muscles. Edit. A lot of people have asked, isn't this normal? If it only happens late at night, you're probably fine. But if it happens during the day, or all the time, or you've gotten used to seeing double and letting one eye wander, there are glasses that can realign each eye, so the dominant eye doesn't have to work as hard and you'll regain much of your depth perception. Story 20. This one's actually about me. Growing up, my mom would always tell me to grab donuts from the Walmart bakery and eat them while we walked around the store. We lived in the country, so we only went shopping every 2 weeks. This became routine, and eventually I did it automatically, without even telling her. In early middle school, a girl who had a crush on me saw me eating a donut at Walmart and asked if I just took them. I said of course. She then grabbed one and ate it with me to prove she was as cool as me, but I couldn't understand why. Later, I told my mom about this, thinking the girl didn't know Walmart had free donuts. That's when my mom revealed she had actually been paying for them all along. Since I hadn't asked her permission for a long time, there's no telling how many donuts I unknowingly stole from Walmart. It's not every day you discover something strange about yourself that you thought was perfectly normal. Story 21. There are some women at work who have made me a little uncomfortable with how relaxed they are in the shared bathroom. One narrates the entire process. Another doesn't properly pull her pants up until after she washes her hands. One even praises Jesus while she takes a dump in the "Aw, Jesus, oh Lord" kind of way. I sincerely hope it's not an actual prayer time for her. But the one who made me the most uncomfortable was a woman who had not one, but 2 speakerphone conversations on an otherwise normal afternoon. I was in the bathroom first, in the hidden corner stall, the only one with minimal gaps, thanks America. She came in already on speakerphone with some financial institution, and yes, she went to the bathroom while the financial institution was on the line. I stayed very quiet, thinking, maybe she'll be quick and leave, as she casually gave out her social security number and resolved some questions about her account. She hung up, and I held my breath. My break was almost over, and I needed to get out, but I was too anxious. What kind of person has speakerphone conversations with their financial institution in a public restroom while using the toilet? No way was I risking that. Then she called her kids. I ended up being 10 minutes late returning from my break and told my boss I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. She continued this behavior fairly regularly until she eventually left the company, and in the meantime, I found a different bathroom to use. Story 22. This was me until about 2 years ago. I always thought kiwis made everyone's mouth itchy. It just seemed like part of the fruit experience. I also thought mangoes were hot for everyone. Well, my wife informed me that I was probably allergic, since mangoes aren't supposed to burn your mouth and kiwis shouldn't make it itch. I didn't believe her. A few months later, I was choking on a mango. I couldn't breathe, my face was turning red, and I couldn't even get the words out to tell her I was struggling. An EpiPen and an ER visit later, I learned I am allergic to mangoes, kiwis, and a host of other tropical fruits. No fruit should make your mouth burn, aside from jalapenos and peppers, and no fruit should make your mouth itch or your lips swell. Apparently, that's called an allergy. Story 23. I am in college and lucky enough to rent a house, though I do have housemates, one of whom we'll call Cade. Cade is 6'4", somewhat portly, usually quiet, but a pretty sassy gay guy once you get past the first barrier. One day, I walked into the kitchen and saw him washing the dishes. No big deal, it was his turn. Since we don't have an automatic dishwasher, I was about to leave when I noticed him pick something up off the counter, bite into it, and then set it back down. I stopped because it was bright yellow, and usually people don't just eat bright yellow things. It turns out Cade eats lemons like apples, peel and all. I confronted him, and he thought it was the funniest thing that I was freaked out by it. Now once or twice a week, I get a Snapchat of him aggressively eating a lemon at me. I think we're going to be friends for a long time. Story 24. I am Hispanic. I was born in Los Angeles, California in 1990 and lived there until I was 13. I grew up in a low-income area with lots of Black and Hispanic people and didn't think much about race or socioeconomics. I then moved to Riverside, California, which had a large Hispanic population, until I was 15, and afterward we moved to Texas. In middle school, I had one white friend who was also a quarter Colombian. Before moving to Cypress, Texas in 2006, I hadn't really seen many white people outside of textbooks, a few teachers or celebrities on TV. When my brother and I started high school, we were completely culturally shocked at how many white people were there. Walking past the main hall, we froze in the center hallway for about 10 minutes, circling slowly and just staring at each other in disbelief. When we first heard the Texan accent, we got defensive, assuming people were being fake nice and trying to trick us. We were so uneducated and unaware of the wider world, completely uncultured and ignorant at the time. Story 25. I have a friend who never tries new foods and refuses to change her diet at all. She thinks this is completely normal. She's never even had a sandwich. She grew up with Korean parents, so most of her meals at home were rice and vegetables. It wasn't until college that she was basically forced to expand her diet. At the cafeteria, she would raid the dessert table and grab a small entree, and my roommate would tell her to go get a side that didn't have frosting on it. The first time she ever had ribs was at my 21st birthday party. She refuses to try new soups, and there are a lot of foods she won't even take a bite of. I have a strong feeling she has Asperger's, which would explain all of this, but she's the first person I've met whose parents aren't forcing her to try new things. I should mention that I also have Asperger's and I am picky with food, though not to this degree. There are many other behaviors of hers that suggest she's autistic, but her extreme pickiness with food fits the theme of this thread. Story 26. This is actually a story about me. My mom has been an addict my whole life. When I was little, I was attached to her hip. I went everywhere with her. When we visited other people's houses, she would go through their cabinets, drawers, and so on. She'd just say she was being nosy, but what she was really doing was looking for medications to steal. Fast forward a few years, I was at my best friend's house. She stepped out of her room for a few minutes, and out of curiosity, I started going through one of her drawers. She came back and asked what I was doing. I remember saying, "Nothing. I am just being nosy." She then explained that it's not okay to go through other people's belongings. At the time, I honestly thought it was something everyone did. I told my dad this story a couple of years ago, and he was so angry he had no idea. Story 27. My now teenage brother counts out 6 pieces of toilet paper, folds it in half neatly, wipes, folds it in half neatly again, wipes, folds it again, wipes every time he goes to the bathroom, until it's a tiny folded square, less than 2 inches on each side. We discovered this habit when he was about 6, and he still does it. His reasoning is that it saves toilet paper and that his poop is so solid he doesn't need to wipe much anyway. This absolutely horrifies our OCD father, especially since he constantly clogs the toilet. Meanwhile, there's always just this tiny folded square of toilet paper floating above it, and our brother almost never unclogs the toilet himself because it's dirty. I mentioned this to coworkers while talking about weird family habits, and they said, "That's not that weird. We fold our toilet paper too, don't you?" Sure, if I have a wad of toilet paper I am using, but not exactly 6 pieces, folded into perfect squares. Story 28. In high school gym class, our teacher was a nice, pretty blonde woman, probably in her late 20s or early 30s. I had procrastinated and was taking the class my senior year. One day, the school went into an unannounced lockdown mid-class, so we all hid in the storage area by the gym. My classmates were extremely loud, and it was clear the teacher was distressed. If it had been a real shooter situation, we would have been in serious danger. She tried to get everyone to quiet down, but no one listened, and they only got louder. She was visibly upset, far more than a teacher annoyed by rowdy students. Eventually, she just sank to the floor and stared silently at the wall. One of the older students tried to talk to her and apologized for the others being so loud. I was sitting a few feet away. She just looked at him and said she had survived Columbine by hiding in the library, and that if a shooter had been on site that day, the whole class would already have been dead. She was such a nice lady, super positive and enthusiastic about being a gym teacher. Our class would take these mile-long walks at the beginning of every session, and sometimes she and I would talk. I vividly remember conversations about things like how big IKEA stores were, just silly, everyday stuff. I had no idea someone like her had gone through something so traumatic. It's stuck with me ever since. I hope she's doing okay. Story 29. This one's about me. My husband is my best friend and the only person I truly want to spend time with. I am obviously pleasant toward coworkers and acquaintances, and if I am directly invited somewhere, I will sometimes go depending on the location, how long I will be there, and who it's with, but the whole time, I can't wait to go home and be with my husband. I go out without him maybe once every few months. There was a period when we were living together but not working, about 6 months because I was in online college and he was between jobs. Spending nearly 24 hours a day with him for 6 months was honestly the best 6 months of my life. Everyone tells me I am psycho for enjoying spending that much time with my husband, comparing it to eating your favorite food, so much that it's not your favorite anymore. But it's been almost 6 years, and I still miss him toward the end of every work shift because it's been so long since I've seen him. He feels the same way. He doesn't really have many friends or go out much without me. I just can't comprehend how someone would even marry another person if they didn't feel this way. Yet apparently, it's very unusual that I don't want alone time or time with friends just to be with my husband. Story 30. When I was 12, we had a fire in the basement of my home. I woke up to a firefighter kicking in my second-floor bedroom window and was promptly removed from the house, wearing only my inners. The father from the house next door let me sit in his living room so I wouldn't be out in the cold. So there I was, 12 years old, sitting in his living room in my inners with all 6 of his daughters. After about 30 minutes, he realized I was about to start crying or run out of the house, so he grabbed a pair of his old sweatpants for me to wear. I put them on and went to the bathroom, silently thanking God I wasn't embarrassing myself in front of all those girls. That's when one of his daughters walked into the bathroom without knocking and just sat down to do her business. Evidently, with so many children in the house, it was normal for one person to be using the toilet while another was brushing their teeth or whatever. Guess no one ever told them that some boundaries exist when guests are over. Story 31. I went out to lunch with a friend and his wife for the first time to discuss some business. When we were choosing the restaurant, he said, "It doesn't matter where we go. I don't eat." This guy is a little strange, so I laughed and we chose a pizza place. Nope. He literally didn't order anything, just a beer. I laughed again and said, "I thought you were joking. You're really not eating." His wife explained, "He literally eats once a day, and it's only peanut butter sandwiches." She added that his doctor said there was no reason for him to be as healthy as he was, but he has no health problems. It's not like he doesn't get hungry. He just hates everything. I don't think it's a taste issue either, because he likes beer and has preferences based on flavor. I've been to several other functions with him and have only ever seen him eat once, a soft pretzel. That was because he had just gotten in from a flight and went straight to a work dinner, so he had to eat something. Story 32. One of my best friends just went with me on a road trip, and during it, we discovered we have completely different definitions of the word fight. He thinks that anything involving a raised tone of voice or any disagreement with even a little emotional investment is a fight. According to him, everyone he knows is constantly having fights with their spouses. I, on the other hand, consider a fight something that isn't immediately resolved and involves actual hurt feelings for one or more people involved. My wife and I have had maybe 2 real fights in over a decade. I told him about one of them, and I think it helped him understand that when I say something, she corrects me awkwardly, and we have a brief discussion about it. We are not fighting. Do other people count that as a fight? Mild banter with occasional disagreement? I genuinely feel like that's exaggerating the use of the word. Story 33. I waited tables at the local trade fair in Germany to earn some extra money. Occasionally, customers ordered tea. I would place the tea bag in the cup, pour boiling water over it, and serve it. One of my colleagues called me out, saying it was unhygienic. She explained that the proper way was to serve boiling water in the cup and place the still-wrapped tea bag next to it so the customer could open it themselves and steep the tea. My colleagues and supervisor agreed, and apparently that is how tea is supposed to be served there. I am still puzzled, since tea prepared this way hardly develops any color. It can taste very good, can it? The tea box itself even stated that only visibly boiling water should be poured over the tea for food safety reasons. Story 34. My entire culture, really. It is perfectly normal in our culture for people to marry their first cousins. So I was shocked when I found out my aunt had married her first cousin. My first thought was, is this normal? My parents then told me that several other family members had done the same. Much to my dismay, many years later, my sister married our first cousin. Later, when my parents, mostly my mother, started suggesting family members, including other first cousins, as potential spouses, I firmly put my foot down and said there was no way I would marry within the family. I suppose it's because I grew up in other countries and was exposed to different ideals, but the thought of marrying a close family member is a big no-no for me. If and when my sister has children, they will be both my nieces or nephews and my first cousins once removed. Her mother-in-law is also her aunt. I find it strange, but in my family and culture, it's considered perfectly normal. Story 35. I didn't know a cup of water was free at fast food restaurants. I always thought you had to pay, so I'd just buy a small soda and ask them to fill it with water. My girlfriend pointed it out during a road trip. She was kind of mean about it and berated me, saying something about me having too much money for my own good. I don't. I've just worked in my career for over 14 years and called me bougie or something ridiculous. It was a Del Taco, for heaven's sake. We're not together anymore. The trip itself was amazing, though completely last minute. I flew up to meet her, rented a car, surprised her, asked what she wanted to do, and we ended up on a spontaneous road trip through Washington. Thank you, water cup. Anyway, I still buy a cup and ask for water. Partly out of habit and partly because I feel guilty about just taking water, and I get a bit more for the road that way. Story 36. So my father's side of the family was part of a eugenics program that started in the 1930s in Mexico. After it was banned, it turned more into a family tale, passed down with advice about what to look for and what to avoid. So far, we've been a fairly healthy family. My father was a special forces guy and is still really athletic in his 60s, and the same goes for me, my siblings, and my nephews. Several relatives were athletes or even special operations veterans later on. It just feels strange to me because, at the time, they all thought it was normal, and it's still somewhat ingrained in us. They've always been cautious about diseases, hereditary traits, desirable and undesirable qualities, and how the offspring might turn out. A lot of people say that's awful and pseudoscience, which caught me off guard because they always believed it was completely normal. I remember hearing my grandmother explain to a cousin what to look for in a woman, repeating much of what her doctor had told her way back in the day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.